And with breaking news tonight, Decatur firefighters on the scene of a warehouse fire on the...
Look at the glow there from that power line that is down. Our top story, terrifying close call caught on camera. Tonight, a fire captain talks only to KCAL 9 about the explosion that literally blew him and a fellow firefighter off their feet.
In serious, unexpected, and often dangerous situations requiring immediate action, we rely on our first responders. They are the first in line, and their safety is on the line. When electricity is involved, it adds another layer of danger to an already hazardous situation. There are many widely believed myths about electricity among first responders, but knowing what's safe and unsafe could mean the difference between life and death, not just for the victims and onlookers at the scene, but for first responders as well. Because you can't help anyone if you get hurt.
I kind of grew up in a family with firefighters, so it's always been something that's been kind of close to me. And once I joined the fire department, I went on that first call, I was kind of hooked. So I wound up 19 years as a firefighter. You know, you have the big structure fires, you have the big wrecks. I have to say the ones that stick out the most are the ones that the children are involved in. That's the ones that really get you.
While Keith was serving his community as a firefighter, he was also working at an electric membership cooperative.
I started out with an EMC as a meter reader. At the end of the month when we were not doing our reading, that was when they would let us go out and train with the line crew, and that's when I knew this is what I want to do. Finally got the opportunity, went out, went through the line progression up to lineman. A lot of stuff that you don't know that I learned that benefited me and as being a firefighter. How dangerous trees on a line could really be. You look at that and you just look at it as a piece of wood laying there, nothing can happen, and that's not true. It actually gets into the root systems, can run the root system, whether it's damp, whether it's dry. With my fire department background and with this, I knew all the way around, I wanted to be in training, some type of training. And the co-op I was at developed a training instructor position, and I got that job, and that's kind of where it all just started to grow from there.
Keith then went on to do first responder and employee safety training for the Georgia Statewide Association, where he worked with all 41 co-ops. He now enjoys working closer to home while still sharing his passion of safety training with others. In total, he's been a safety presenter for more than 20 years.
And about a year and a half ago, I went to work for Tri-County EMC as the manager of safety and training. And the management there is, their major concern is safety.
When it comes to training linemen and first responders, Keith has worked in both professions, and his experience provides important insights.
The first thing is they're going to have to understand a little bit of each other's jobs. Everybody always thinks that their job is more important than the other person's job, and that's a good way to feel, because that makes you better at your job. When we pull out there, each one of those jobs that are out there are just as important as the other one. They are just as dangerous as the other one. And if we watch out for each other, we work together, and we understand, okay, at this point, this is what needs to happen. At this point, this is what needs to happen. It's going to work a lot smoother, and everybody's going to go home at the end of the night.
Of all of the possible emergency issues involving electricity, Keith and other experts are focusing on 5 big issues: pulling meters, downed lines, equipment contacting power lines, damaged pad mount transformers, and power pole fires.
Pulling meters, to me, is one of the biggest problems that we have. A lot of the firefighter stuff have been taught or trained in the past that pulling the meter de-energizes electricity and they can go in the house and do anything, and that's really far from the truth. We don't even let most of the personnel at the co-ops go up and just pull the meters.
Pulling the meter all by itself may not really do what you think it's going to do. So we really recommend not pulling the meter.
A lot of the meters, when you go out and you pull it, all you've done is the revenue metering is gone. If the meter is CT'd, it's still energized.
People may have alternative sources of power coming into the structure. Some people sometimes bypass the meter, trying to get energy at little or no cost. Sometimes because of the situation, pulling the meter all by itself may not really do what you think it's going to do.
You have the situation where the service can come in on one side and the meter base could be on the other side. And when they pull the meter, the entrance cable that runs throughout the attic is still hot. And if they're venting a roof or pulling sheetrock, that wire could still be hot.
If you're going to shut down the power, call the power company, have them assist you. Also, if you're going to shut down the power, use the main breaker or the fuse box and pull the main, or just trip the breaker, because that's exactly what that is designed to do, to shut off the power in the structure. We're pulling the meter, that's not what that's there for.
A lot of people have the misconception because it's 120 volts that go into your house that it's the same thing, you know, that's in your outlet. They're like, oh, with the main lines out there on the road are 7,200 volts or 14,400 volts. This is just 120. I don't really need to worry. And that's not true. The voltage is not what kills you, it's the amperage. A lot of the studies that you read, it takes 1/10 of an amp to put a person into cardiac arrest. And on that service wire there, under normal conditions, could be somewhere between 80 and 120 amps. During a fire or some type of emergency right there, with faulty conditions, there's no telling what that amperage could be.
So when it comes to pulling meters, don't. An electric meter is not a load break device. Some meter socket bases can even cause a flash and explosion when pulled, so leave any work with the meter to the utility crew.
Car versus pole, that's always been a big one. It's one of those things, you know, when a car hits a pole, everybody's most important issue is that patient or that person that's in that vehicle. And being on both sides as a lineman and an emergency responder, I know what happens. You know, when we get there, one of the biggest things we do is we wind up getting that tunnel vision. What we see is we see that person in the car that needs my assistance, and I need to get there no matter what. The best thing that they can do is to tell that person to stay inside that car.
We need to make sure that they stay safe, and whether it's, you know, standing there from far away and advising them, you know, via a PA through our squad car to remain calm. We've got emergency crews on their way, but a lot of times just the education of the people that are inside the vehicle to try to keep them calm and safe. A lot of it is how we respond to the scene as well.
We're action-oriented people as first responders. That's why we're in that career. But you've got to also realize that if you become injured, you're no longer an asset, you're a liability. And we always want to be an asset to the emergency or to the scene. So we have to do that assessment, do our due diligence. The individuals in the vehicle generally are not at risk from the energized line, long as they stay in the vehicle and don't become that contact between the energy and the ground. So long as they're in the vehicle, they're going to be okay.
The emergency personnel, we need to stay back at least 50 feet. That's our circle of safety. We want to stage our vehicles a span and a half back from the accident. And the way step potential works is you can think of taking a rock and you throw it into the lake and it makes the ripples. Okay, everything that's inside of this one ripple right here is at the same potential. So as long as I'm standing in that ripple, I would be fine. But when I take a step, put one foot into that other ripple, now I have a difference of potential, and that's when you could be electrocuted. So same thing as when a line or line falls down on the car and the person is sitting inside the car, they're at the same potential. They're safe. But when they open that car door and go to step out of the car, they're touching the car and the ground, they're at two difference of potential, and that's when they could be electrocuted. So that's the reason that we're telling them stay inside the car. I know we like to park close because our hydraulic hoses from our cutters and our spreaders and that type of stuff, we need it close, but we don't want to put that piece of equipment in there where it could just wind up being taken out of service.
There's been instances where we've arrived on scene and other officers have arrived on scene at multiple crashes where there is a line down. We don't know if it's a power line, we don't know if it's a telephone line, we don't know if it's a cable line. It doesn't matter. We always err on the side of caution.
You can't assume ever that that power line isn't conducting or isn't carrying a charge. And you also have to be concerned with the other lines that are part of the system, whether it's a telephone line or a cable line. Yeah, that's a cable line, yes, that's a telephone line, and it's down here, and of course you assume that that would be no power, but what you didn't realize is 3 doors down or a half a block down, the high energy line has fallen and electrified the cable TV or the phone line. So you have to treat every line down as if it's a energized electrical line. Never assume, and you'll keep yourself out of trouble. Every year there are individuals and responders accidentally injured because they came into contact with these energized lines, not realizing the danger that they've put themselves in.
A few years ago we had a tornado that tore through Illinois and there were multiple lines down, and we had firsthand experience where we were lined up, we set up the perimeter, we were not to let anybody come or go, including pedestrian traffic, and it was nice because we could visibly see those lines and we knew that's nothing to mess around with.
A lot of times these are during storms, water's on the ground, water's on the street. There was an incident in Madison, Wisconsin a number of years ago where a power line fell down onto the street. Some individuals got out of the bus, stepped into the water in the curb, and were electrocuted. Individual long as they were in the bus were safe. They saw the people being electrocuted. They thought they could just quickly grab them. Well, you can't quickly grab them. It isn't going to go well, and it ended up being a fatal incident.
When the power company gets there, they de-energize the lines are grounded, then we can go in there and start working as emergency personnel.
Even when responding to timber or grass fires, be on the lookout for damage to power lines. A line could be down where there's fire or a fallen tree, and the other end of that line could also be down and dangerous. Keep a minimum 50-foot radius circle of safety from all downed lines. When power lines fall, you cannot tell by looking if they or objects they're in contact with are energized. Even if a breaker appears to be off when you first arrive, it could reclose and re-energize. When downed lines are involved, the electric utility must be contacted immediately. As first responders, when you arrive on the scene, stay in your vehicles and use them to establish and protect a minimum 50-foot radius circle of safety until the utility has de-energized the line and says it's safe to move in.
The fire department uses aerial devices, heavy equipment, construction companies use devices, whether it's an articulating boom or whether it's a end loader or something like that. A lot of times the power lines are above your head, and if you aren't cognizant to that, you aren't paying attention to that. So it's important that any time that you're working by overhead lines that you're diligent, that you've got spotters there to make sure that you're not coming too close, because sometimes it's hard to judge when you're working on the pedestal of an aerial or when you're in a end loader and you're working near power lines. It's important to have that spotter or that safety person there that can stop you from making a serious mistake.
We have cranes, setting billboards. We have well drilling rigs that get into the power lines. Dump trucks are another one as they raise their bed, dumping their load, and they get into the power lines. That is one of the things. If that happens, we try to tell the fire, you want to stay on that piece of equipment. It would be the same as the energized line down on the car because of the step potential. If somebody is on the ground, don't try to get on the equipment, because once again, you're touching the ground and the equipment.
We're a farming community, and most of Illinois is, and anytime that we have large machinery operating in the spring and in the fall, we have that potential for somebody coming into contact, or even if they're not out on the roadway, sometimes they're within the field and they're turning and there's that contact. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a roadway accident. Just like anybody that hits a deer or hits another car, their instinct is to hop out and see what the damage is.
We want to make sure that the operator or the driver remains in the vehicle. We're just going to secure that perimeter around there. The emergency responder needs to maintain that 50 feet circle of safety and basically just wait until the power company gets there to de-energize, to ground the lines, and then they'll give us the okay to move in there.
We've got to be watching for not what's going on right now, but what the potential emergency can be because of the actions that we are conducting. So, power lines above us in our operation, if we lose focus for a minute, we can have an unrecoverable accident, and it only takes a minute of inattention to not be able to recover from that.
Whether it's farm or large equipment, elevated lift, or your own trucks and equipment, it is vital to maintain safety clearances at all times. Keep yourself and all equipment safely away in all directions from overhead lines. Some equipment in areas require 20-foot clearances, so know the recommendations for your equipment. If contact with overhead lines is made, those in or on the equipment should stay there until utility crews de-energize the line and provide the okay for first responders to go in.
The best way that I like to explain what a pad mount transformer is it is a power pole inside of a box. Everything that you see on that pole out there, primary lines, neutral, transformer, secondaries, all of that stuff is inside that pad mounted transformer.
One of the most spectacular energy fires I ever saw was a vault fire underground, heavy black smoke, and a lot of arcing and that bright blue light that you see coming from the manholes in the ground. As long as those lines are energized, they're too much of a hazard for the firefighters to deal with. So it's important that the local power company comes in and shuts those down. As soon as they shut those down, the energy source is gone. What's causing the fire goes away. And there could be, it may not have a lot of outward damage, but it could be significant enough to cause damage inside and dislodge the equipment, energizing that metal container around there.
If a car does hit that, it needs to be handled exactly like if it struck a pole. The people need to remain inside the vehicle. They need to notify the power company immediately. They need to maintain the 50-foot circle of safety and wait until they get there and they tell them that it's dead and grounded and they can move in.
If we have an onlooker, we try to obviously keep them back, and a lot of times people want to help. Their instinct is to help, and we need to be able to advise them it's not safe to go up there.
It's a very common problem for us to respond to is a construction crew had miscalculated where the power line was, or an individual failed to call the number to mark the power lines that are underground. Coming into contact by digging or working with that can very, very quickly turn into a disaster, whether it's heavy equipment that struck that line or your post hole digger or whatever you're doing. And those people can very well be part of that grounding circuit, be energized, and until the power company has secured that, you're just not necessarily sure. Secure the scene and get the power company involved to make sure that individual isn't part of that energized circuit.
Treat pad mount transformers the way you would a power pole. If a pad mount transformer or underground line has been damaged, the area and equipment around it could be energized. Call the electric utility, set a perimeter of safety, and keep people safely away.
I try to train the people when they pull up, we need to look at the whole situation. Look at the, 360 degrees. Are all the lines up in the air? Is there a tree leaning on the line, and that could have been what started the fire? So, because it's very easy when those lines fall and get down under some leaves or something, I mean, it's almost like a rattlesnake. It's just waiting on somebody to walk through there. So we've got to examine all of that. We don't want to be spraying water. We don't want to be walking anywhere around these lines. And we've got to find out, what caused it.
A lot of times farmers have controlled burns. There are different landowners that have controlled burns, and the pole itself can start on fire. Sometimes it's a slow burn, and so that pole starts to sway and it starts to drag, and those lines start to get pulled. Sometimes it's something that's it's a real quick drop, and then now you've got down lines because of a pole fire, but the landowner doesn't know, and now they're out mowing the yard, or now they're out and the kids are riding the four-wheeler or the golf cart, and now there's a potential for an accident.
You could have a transformer on fire because of the oil that's in the transformer, or the pole is on fire. Again, that fire is isolated to that location. It's not going anywhere. It is not worth the risk to the firefighters or the first responders to try to contain that fire until the energy is secured. And as long as that line is energized, it's going to continue to want to burn. It's going to reignite itself. So you need to get that energy shut down. You need to get that electricity shut down to truly control that scene. Call the power company. Once the power is shut off, it's just a Class A burning material or a Class B burning material. You can very quickly respond to that and deal with that.
The green poles or CCA poles that we use, in my experience, they burned from the inside out. I've seen that a lot of times, is the fire could actually be sucked into one of the checks or cracks that's in a pole, and they will sit there and they could smolder for a couple days, and then all of a sudden the top breaks out of it. I've heard stories about where they've contacted them, a week later, and the power company has gotten out there, and all of the material, the metal material, is laying on the ground. The pole's completely gone. So if they pull up on a fire and there is a pole that's involved, sits out in the middle of the field or in the edge of the woods, where they need to notify that power company and let them ride by and inspect that, because it may look like there's nothing wrong, and it could show up 2 or 3 days later. That's something that the EMC or the power company needs to make that determination.
It could be a slow, something that you don't notice is still burning. So absolutely call the power company. Anytime you see something that there's a potential for the hazard, it's better safe than sorry on that one too.
If you're at a structure fire or a building that's on fire, you also have to be concerned with the fact that that fire extends to an area where the power comes into the structure, heating up that area and leading to a failure of that power line. And once that energized line fails, it's going to fall into the middle of the scene, and it's going to create a lot more problems.
The emergency responder needs to maintain that 50 feet circle of safety and basically just wait until the power company gets there to de-energize, to ground the lines, and then they'll give us the okay to move in there. The last thing we want is to wind up with, we have one patient to wind up with multiple patients.
Once the power company is on scene, it doesn't take them 5 minutes to control the utilities and completely negate that hazard to the firefighters on the scene.
From prescribed burnings that get out of control to structure fires near overhead lines, each has their own set of hazards and can cause serious damage to utility poles. Do not attempt to use water to put out a pole fire. As long as it's energized, the fire will not go out. It will simply reignite, and the base of the pole could be energized. Be aware of your surroundings and the big picture. If poles and lines are an issue, call the utility to shut off the power. Pulling meters, equipment and lines, downed lines, pole fires, damaged pad mount transformers. 5 big electrical issues you need to know how to safely deal with when an emergency call comes in and you go out.
The alarm goes off, you have to go, you have to think on your feet, you have to just be able to react. I've been on both sides. I've been on the fire department side and I've been on the EMC side. As a first responder, if utility equipment is involved, you need to notify your dispatcher immediately so that that dispatcher can notify the EMC. You need to remain at least that 50 feet circle of safety back from that equipment until the lineman gets there, says that it's dead, that it's de-energized, it's grounded, and that we can move in. And this is very important because, like I said, it may look like some minor little problem if we have lines down or if we have a pad mount that's involved, and that could actually turn into something deadly later down the road. So you need to involve them immediately. You know, don't wait, let them come out. If we come out, there's nothing there, guess what? There's no harm, no foul. But we have a responsibility of responding just like they do.
We all look to first responders in emergency situations. They are the first in line to put their safety on the line. Follow safe procedures every time. Do a 360 and evaluate the scene. Identify the hazards and potential hazards. Don't wait to call the utility if electricity is involved. Every second counts. Establish and protect the perimeter until the utility crew arrives. Rely on your electric utility to de-energize the situation before proceeding further. We're all on the same team, and each plays a vital part in keeping everyone safe. It's important that utility crews coordinate with Incident Command to first make the scene safe. Don't take chances. You not only put yourself at risk, but also incident victims and fellow first responders, because when you're injured, you become a liability.
It's the same for the fire or the police or the lineman out there. It's kind of like playing Russian roulette. And I actually have a slide that I have this, and it's like playing Russian roulette. You know, you could put the gun up to your head, spin the cylinder, and pull the trigger, and it may click. You got away with it this time. You know, I may spin the cylinder, pull the trigger, and it clicks. I got away with it again. But the more times that you play this and the more times that you spin that cylinder, eventually that bullet's going to chamber up. You may get away with it once, you may get away with it twice, but eventually, if you're doing something you're not supposed to be doing, it's going to catch up with you. Nobody can just walk in off the street and do one of these jobs. These are people that are highly qualified, highly trained, and they take their job seriously. We're out there to watch each other's back. What I want us to do is come out there as one crew and work together.